My fiancé tucked the document into his leather briefcase like it was the deed to me life, not knowing he had just signed his own confession. I watched him from the security feed in my real office, 58 floors above Midtown Manhattan, while the city glittered under a cold November rain. Grant Whitaker stepped into the private elevator with the kind of smile men wear when they think a woman's silence means surrender. He adjusted his watch, the one he bought with a credit card he believed was tied to my inheritance, and squeezed the blue folder against his chest like it held the future. It did. Just not the future he imagined. He didn't read the last page, Denise said behind me. I didn't turn around. I could see her reflection in the window, gray suit, tight bun, calm eyes, the kind of woman people underestimated only once. Denise was my head of security, my investigator, and the closest thing I had to family after my father died. No, I said, setting my coffee on my father's walnut desk. Men like Grant don't read. They perform confidence and expect the world to applaud. Denise gave a small laugh. Then tomorrow morning is going to hurt. Below us, Manhattan kept moving like nothing important had happened. Yellow cabs crawled through the rain, office lights burned in towers where people were still fighting deadlines, clients, marriages, lawsuits, secrets. Somewhere in that storm, Grant was on his way to celebrate with his business partner, Owen Brooks. He would tell Owen that he finally had my signature. The power to sell my office, move my accounts, control my trust, protect me after our wedding. That was his favorite phrase. Protect me. As if it were a fragile little thing. He had found wandering through life without a man to explain numbers, contracts, and danger. For 11 months, I let him believe it. He thought I ran a struggling neighborhood legal clinic in Queens called Harbor Street Legal. He thought I lived in a rented brownstone apartment with squeaky floors and old pipes. He thought my father left behind a messy estate, a few confused accounts, and a daughter too grief-stricken to understand what she owned. He never knew Harbor Street Legal was a front. He never knew the old brownstone belonged to one of my family trusts. He never knew my father was the founder of Harlow & Bell, one of the most powerful private litigation firms in the country. And he definitely never knew that I, Evelyn Harlow, had been the managing partner for 3 years. Grant knew me as Evie Bell, the soft-spoken attorney with cheap heels, tired eyes, and a habit of saying, "I'll have to check," whenever he pushed too hard. I gave him exactly the woman he wanted to conquer. It started at a charity gala at the New York Public Library. He approached me near the marble stairs while donors laughed over champagne and photographers snapped pictures of people pretending generosity was a hobby instead of a tax strategy. "You look like you'd rather be reading the contracts than drinking the wine," he said. It was a good line. I hated that it made me smile. Grant Whitaker looked like someone designed him for trust. Dark blonde hair, blue eyes, expensive suit, easy laugh. He worked in venture finance, or at least that was what his glossy website claimed. Whitaker Growth Partners, strategic investments, family offices, legacy planning. The usual perfume sprayed over other people's money. He said he admired independent women. Then he slowly began teaching me how independent women should behave. At first it was flowers, dinners, Sunday walks through Central Park, voice messages in the morning. Then came the questions dressed as concern. Who handles what your dad left you? Why are you still wasting time on small clients? Do you have someone reviewing your accounts? You're brilliant, Evie, but you're too trusting. The first time he said that, I almost laughed in his face. Instead, I lowered my eyes and let him place his hand over mine. Men like Grant don't break into houses. They convince you to hand them the key, then blame you for leaving the door open. By month 4, he had started insulting me in small, polished ways. At dinner with his friends, he called me my little public service lawyer, like my career was a charming flaw. When I corrected him on a contract clause, he smiled at the table and said, "She gets nervous around big deals." When a waiter brought the wrong wine, Grant leaned toward me and whispered, "This is why I handle the expensive conversations." His friends laughed. I laughed too. That was the hardest part. Not the waiting. Not the pretending. The laughing. Because every time I laughed, I could hear my father's voice from years ago, stern and gentle at once. "Never interrupt a liar too early, princess. Let him build the whole staircase before you remove the bottom step." So I let Grant build. I showed him incomplete financial statements. I left fake mail on my kitchen counter. I allowed him to overhear staged calls about delayed invoices and estate confusion. I let him meet my accountant, who was actually a forensic auditor. I let him suggest small improvements to my life until the improvements turned into demands. Then, 3 weeks before the wedding, he started pushing for legal control. "It's just a protective power of attorney," he said in my fake office, sitting across from me as if he had practiced the scene in a mirror. "After we're married, if something happens to you, I need to be able to act quickly." What kind of something? I asked. He reached across the desk and touched my hair. I hated that touch more than any insult. Evie, baby. Don't do that. Don't make this scary. I'm trying to take care of us. Us. There was no us. There was only his appetite and my patience. I looked at the papers he brought. They were messy but dangerous. Broad authority. Account access. Property management. Business transfers. Medical decision language hidden beside. Financial control. Enough to ruin a woman if she signed while in love. So I let my hand tremble. Do I need my own lawyer to look at it? His jaw tightened for half a second. Then the smile returned. I am your family now. That was the sentence that nearly ended the game. Not because it frightened me. Because it made me want to stand up, call Denise, and have him dragged out by security while I told him exactly who he had been trying to rob. But anger is expensive when spent too early. So I nodded. I trust you. The lie made his eyes shine. He slid the papers forward. I signed where I was supposed to sign. Then I pulled out another packet and told him my assistant had prepared a duplicate acknowledgement for my records. He didn't even look at the heading. He signed every page. Initialed every clause. Pressed his thumb to the notary seal. Because the notary asked him to. That notary was real. The document was real. The trap was real. What Grant signed was not a power of attorney. It was a sworn acknowledgement of fraudulent intent, unauthorized charges made in my name, attempted asset manipulation, forged listing documents, conspiracy with his business partner, and consent for all related recordings and financial trails Tobe delivered to law enforcement. Everything had been reviewed by 4 attorneys, 2 retired federal prosecutors, and my father's oldest friend, Judge Marion Wells, who had once told me, if you're going to destroy a man in court, make sure he carries the match. Grant carried it proudly. On the screen, I watched him leave my fake office and enter a black SUV. Denise tapped her tablet, and the feed changed to a private lounge downtown. Owen Brooks was already there, sitting under a brass lamp with 2 glasses of scotch. Grant walked in laughing. Owen stood and hugged him. Tell me she signed. She signed everything, Grant said. Didn't read a word. They clinked glasses. Denise turned up the audio. Tomorrow, Grant said, I start moving the accounts. After the wedding, I sell that little queen's office and convince her to stay home. She'll LCRY for a week, then thank me for taking pressure off her. Owen smirked. And the trust? She thinks it's complicated. I'll make it look more complicated. By the time she figures anything out, we'll have cleaned it. What about the wedding? Grant leaned back. The wedding is the hook. Nobody suspects the concerned husband. I felt something cold move through me chest, but not for me. For Lila Dawson, who lost her savings after Grant convinced her to invest in a private fund that never existed. For Meredith Shaw, who lost her condo in Boston after signing a temporary transfer to protect it from a fake lawsuit. For Ruth Whitaker, Grant's aunt by marriage, who had been talked into liquidating her retirement account for a company registered to Grant's mother. All 3 women would be in my office tomorrow morning. Grant thought I was his first clean victory. He had no idea I was the woman they found after he left them with nothing. Denise muted the sound. Do you want to cancel dinner? I looked at the rain running down the glass. Somewhere in me reflection was the woman Grant thought he had invented, quiet, grateful, easily embarrassed, desperate to be chosen. No, I said. Denise frowned. You sure? Tonight, I'm still his sweet little fiancé. I stood, opened the drawer, and took out the simple pearl earrings I wore whenever I played Evie Bell. I put them on slowly, watching my own face harden in the glass. Tomorrow, I said, he meets Evelyn Harlow. Grant was waiting at a private restaurant in Tribeca with a $2,400 bottle of Winnie on the table and the satisfied glow of a man already spending someone else's future. He stood when I arrived, kissed my cheek, and smelled like bourbon, rain, and victory. Baby, he said, pulling out my chair. You look beautiful. I wore a cream sweater dress from a discount store, the one he once told me made me look less intimidating. My hair was pinned low. My makeup was soft. My posture was a lie. Thank you, I said, sitting across from him. This place is expensive. His smile widened. Tonight is special. What are we celebrating? Our future. In my left earring, a tiny transmitter carried every word to Denise. Grant poured the wine himself, as if the gesture proved tenderness. The hard part is over. The paperwork, the planning, the legal protection. Now we can focus on the wedding. The Hamptons house? I asked. He ached for my hand. Already handled. Denise's voice came through my hidden earpiece. He just charged $87,000 to the decoy corporate card for the venue deposit. I lifted my water glass to hide my expression. Isn't that too much? I asked. Grant squeezed my fingers. Evie, you don't have to think that way anymore. Money makes you anxious. Let Meckery that. There it was again. The cage disguised as comfort. I don't want Toba burden, I whispered. His eyes softened, but not with love. With ownership, you could never be a burden to me. But after we're married, things need structure. You'll feel better. Once we sell Harbor Street Legal. My office? Our office, eventually. But honestly, baby, it drains you. Those clients drain you. You come home exhausted, and for what? Tenant disputes? Immigration paperwork? Little family fights? You're not built for that. I looked down. He continued, warmed by his own authority. I spoke with a commercial broker. Just to explore options. Denise said in my ear, broker uploaded the listing 8 minutes ago using your forged authorization. My stomach tightened. Not because I was surprised. Because each new crime was another brick in the wall that would fall on him. I wish you had asked me first, I said softly. Grant sighed, the way men sigh when they want credit for tolerating a woman's feelings. I knew you'd get emotional. That's why I handled it. I let silence sit between us. Hemistook it for shame. Look, he said, leaning closer, you are smart. Nobody is saying you aren't. But there's a difference between being a good little lawyer and managing real wealth. Good little lawyer. I felt Denise go quiet in my ear. She knew that phrase hit something in me. When my father died, board members twice my age Trieto called me emotional. Opposing counsel called me decorative. Journalists called me an heiress playing lawyer. I earned every inch of my place while men like Grant inherited rooms and called it skill. I smiled faintly. I'm lucky you understand these things. He relaxed. Exactly. For the next hour, he talked too much. That was another thing about men like Grant. Once they believed they had won, they confused confession with conversation. He talked about moving our money into safer accounts. He talked about limiting my hours after the wedding so I could focus on our home. He talked about introducing me to his mother, Patricia, for family financial guidance. I knew Patricia Whitaker. Not personally. Not yet. But I knew her signature. She had appeared in bank records connected to fake investment vehicles, charity committees, women's networking luncheons, and shell companies with names like Legacy Bridge Capital and Silverline Community Holdings. Patricia did not look like a criminal. She looked like a retired society wife who wore silk scarves, donated to museums, and cried at scholarship dinners. That was the genius of it. She found lonely women with money, women freshly divorced, widowed, embarrassed, exhausted, aging under the pressure of being polite. Then Grant came in as the charming son, the advisor, the lover, the savior. Owen Brooks handled paperwork. A rotating circle of brokers, notaries, and accountants made everything look legitimate until the money disappeared. Grant was not a wolf alone. He was the pretty face of a machine. When I excused myself to the restroom, Denise was waiting near the sinks in a black coat. You okay? She asked. No, it was the truth, and she deserved it. Denise softened. You don't have to go back out there. Yes, I do. She held out a tablet. Tomorrow's announcement goes live at 6 a.m. Harlow and Bell officially acquires Whitaker Growth Partners after the emergency creditor action. Your name appears as managing partner. Harbor Street Legal is listed as a strategic outreach subsidiary. And law enforcement? Federal Financial Crimes Unit confirmed. State Attorney General's office confirmed. 3 reporters from national business outlets confirmed. Lila, Meredith, and Ruth arrive at 8:30. Ruth is coming? Denise nodded. She said she wants to look him in the eye. I looked at myself in the mirror. Cheap sweater dress. Soft face. Pearl earrings. A woman built from Grant's fantasies. For almost 1 year, I let him explain law to me. I let him correct my pronunciation off financial terms. I let him introduce me as almost too kind for this city. I let his friends laugh. When he said I would be happier planning dinner parties than arguing cases. I let him shrink me in public so he would expand in private. Tomorrow, the room would change size. When I returned to the table, Grant was texting. Work? I asked, just Owen. Some investment timing. Denise whispered, he told Owen they'll begin liquidating positions at 9 o'clock using the supposed authorization. Grant put his phone face down and raised his glass. To us, he said. And to never worrying about money again. I touched my glass to his. To getting exactly what we deserve. He laughed, thinking I meant love. At 5:50 the next morning, I stood in my real office wearing a charcoal suit and no pearls. The city outside was still blue with dawn. My father's desk had been cleared except for 3 folders, a silver pen, and a framed photograph of him standing in front of the original Harlow and Bell office in 1988. He looked younger than I ever remembered him, sleeves rolled up, tie crooked, eyes full of impossible certainty. Denise stood beside the monitors. Grant just arrived, she said. The screen showed him entering Whitaker Growth Partners, coffee in one hand, blue folder in the other. Owen arrived 4 minutes later carrying a laptop bag and wearing the nervous excitement of a man who had already counted money not yet stolen. They laughed in the conference room. At 6 o'clock, the financial alerts hit. Harlow and Bell acquires Whitaker Growth Partners in sweeping credit restructure. Evelyn Harlow, managing partner and heiress to Harlow Legal Dynasty, to oversee transition. Harbor Street Legal revealed as pro bono subsidiary in National Fraud Initiative. On the screen, Grant saw my name. At first, he smiled like his brain refused the information. Then he clicked. My official photograph filled his laptop screen. No cream sweater. No timid posture. No Evie Bell. Just me in a black suit, standing in the courtroom where I had won the Mercer class action 2 years earlier. Grant's mouth opened. Owen leaned over, read the headline, and grabbed the blue folder. Audio on, I said. Denise turned a tup. What the hell is this? Owen snapped. Grant was flipping pages now. Fast. Then slower. Then not at all. He had reached the sworn acknowledgement. His hands began to shake. He turned another page and found the list of unauthorized charges. Another page and found the forged listing authorization. Another and found the clause consenting to release off-supporting recordings to enforcement agencies upon attempted execution of the fraudulent power. Owen backed away from the table. Grant, he said, tell me you didn't sign this. Grant stared at the page. Then he said the first honest thing I had ever heard from him. I didn't read it. Denise looked at me. Elevators are locked. Building security has Owen at the east exit. I picked up the silver pen from my father's desk and put it in my pocket. Now, I said. The private elevator took me down 28 floors into the conference. Level Harlow and Bell now controlled. When the doors opened, 2 security officers stepped aside. I walked into the room. Grant was standing at the head of the table, pale and furious, the blue folder open in front of him like a wound. For a moment, nobody spoke. He looked at my suit. My face. The security behind me. The monitors on the wall showing news outlets repeating my name. Evie, he said. I sat at the head of the table. No, I said. You never met Evie. His throat moved. I placed my hands on the table and looked directly at him. My name is Evelyn Harlow. And that, Grant, is what happens when you don't read the fine print. Grant tried to laugh. It came out broken. Okay, he said, lifting both hands. Okay, this is dramatic. I get it. You're angry. Angry? I asked. He looked at Owen, then back at me. You lied about who you were. That almost impressed me. The audacity of a thief accusing the house of wearing curtains. I created a controlled environment, I said. You created a criminal conspiracy. This is entrapment. No, I said. Entrapment would mean I made you do something you weren't already trying to do. I gave you paper. You brought the greed. Owen pushed away from the wall. I want my lawyer. You should, Denise said, entering behind me with another folder. You're going to need one. Grant's eyes snapped to her. Who are you? The woman who has been listening to you for 9 months. The color drained from his face again. Denise placed the folder on the table. It was thick enough to make Owen sit down. Unauthorized corporate charges, she said. Emails between you and Mr. Brooks. Broker communications. Wire instructions. False listing documents. Texts. Discussing asset movement. Audio from last night's dinner. Audio from the lounge after the signing. Financial trails connected to Patricia Whitaker. Grant flinched at his mother's name. Don't bring my mother into this. I leaned forward. Your mother brought herself into it when she used scholarship luncheons to find widows. His expression changed. That was the first twist he had not prepared for. He could handle being caught. Men like Grant always imagine a negotiation after being caught. An apology. A settlement. A private embarrassment. A check. A second chance to Rosita's mercy. But he had not imagined his mother exposed. Owen looked at Grant slowly. Patricia is in the file? Grant snapped, shut up. The conference room screen turned on behind me. Grant's own face appeared, captured from the lounge the night before. He was laughing. With his scotch raised. She signed everything, the recording said. Didn't re-out a word. Owen's recorded voice followed. What about the wedding? Grant smiled on screen. The wedding is the hook. Nobody suspects the concerned husband. The room went quiet. Grant stared at the screen as if he could intimidate his past self into silence. Then another clip played. His voice at dinner. There's a difference between being a good little lawyer and managing real wealth. Denise paused it there. I let the sentence hang. For 11 months, I had swallowed that voice. Now it belonged to the room. Grant pulled out a chair and sat down hard. Evelyn, he said, changing tone. Lower now. Almost tender. Please. You and I can talk privately. No, we were engaged. No. You selected a target and bought a ring. His jaw clenched. I loved you. You studied me. He looked toward the door. It opened before he could say anything else. 2 federal investigators entered with an assistant state attorney general and a woman from the Financial Crimes Division. Behind them came Judge Marion Wells, not in robes but in a navy coat, her silver hair pinned back, her eyes colder than the rain outside. Grant stood so quickly his chair hit the wall. Judge Wells, he said. I don't understand. She looked at him like she had seen 100 men exactly like him and had enjoyed nani off them. You rarely do, Mr. Whitaker. Then the second door opened. Lila Dawson walked in first. Grant froze. Lila was 45, tall, elegant, with a scar near her eyebrow from a car accident she had survived the year after Grant emptied her accounts. She placed a folder on the table and didn't look away from him. You told me I was too emotional to handle my own money, she said. Remember? Grant swallowed. Meredith Shaw entered next, carrying a worn leather binder against her chest. She had sold her grandmother's condo in Boston because Grant and Owen convinced her a fake lien would destroy her credit. She had spent 2 years in rentals while they laughed through charity dinners. Ruth Whitaker came last. Grant's aunt by marriage. The woman Patricia had used as proof that family could be trusted. Ruth was 68, small, and dressed in a red coat. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. You told me your mother would never let anyone hurt me, Ruth said. Grant looked at the floor. That was when I knew we had him. Not legally. We already had him legally. I mean humanly. His charm did not work in a room full of women who had already survived it. Lila opened her folder. Bank statements. Wire records. Emails from Grant. Meredith placed down her binder. Property transfer documents. Owen's notarized instructions. The forged amendment. Ruth stepped forward and put a small envelope on the table. Patricia's handwritten note telling me to liquidate before the opportunity closed. Owen stared at the envelope like it had teeth. Grant whispered, Aunt Ruth. She smiled sadly. You stopped calling me that when the money cleared. I watched him shrink. Not collapse. Men like Grant do not collapse when exposed. They reorganize. They search for the weakest wall. They find the woman most likely to forgive. His eyes came back to me. Evelyn, he said, whatever happened with them has nothing to do with us. The room felt suddenly airless. Lila took one step forward. Us? Meredith's hand tightened around her binder. Ruth closed her eyes. I stood. There is no us, I said. There is a pattern. And today, the pattern ends. At 8:57, reporters began gathering in the lobby. By 9:20, the story had moved beyond business news. By 10 o'clock, the phrase romance fraud network was everywhere. Grant still believed there was a version of the morning he could survive. Then Denise revealed the map. It appeared on the conference screen in clean blue lines, accounts in Delaware, Miami, Nevada, and the Cayman Islands. Shell companies connected through Patricia's charities. Transfers routed through Owen's consulting invoices. Real estate purchases under family trusts. Payments to brokers. Payments to notaries, payments to 2 accountants who had suddenly resigned 6 months earlier. The machine had a skeleton. And every bone had a name. Grant stared at the map. Owen whispered, You said she only had the decoy accounts. Grant turned toward him slowly. In every partnership built on theft, betrayal waits near the exit. I looked at Owen. Mr. Brooks, the State Attorney General's office is prepared to discuss cooperation. Grant snapped, Don't say anything. Owen laughed once, a terrified little sound. You signed a confession. You were part of it. You said she was nobody. I felt the words like a slap, even though they proved everything. Nobody. That was what Grant needed me to be. Nobody with a father's name. Nobody with training. Nobody with anger. Nobody with friends. Nobody with cameras. Nobody with a firm powerful enough to buy his company out from under him before breakfast. I walked to the window overlooking the lobby. Cameras flashed below. Security held the line. A reporter from a national network was speaking into a microphone under the Harlow and Bell logo. The firm my father built. The firm Grant thought I was too soft to run. When I turned back, Grant was looking at me with something close to hatred. There it is, I said. What? The real face? I wondered when I'd finally see it. You ruined my life. No. I documented it. You humiliated me. You proposed to me so you could rob me. You let me believe you loved me. I almost smiled, but there was no humor left in me. That bothered you? Being misled by someone you trusted? He went silent. Good. Some lessons do not need explanation. The investigators began separating them for interviews. Owen asked for counsel and then immediately asked what cooperation would mean. Grant refused to answer questions. Patricia Whitaker's attorney called twice before noon, which told Meher accounts had already started freezing. But the biggest blow came at 1:15 p.m. Denise entered my office with a tablet. You need to see this. On the screen was a video from a private charity luncheon 5 months earlier. Patricia stood beside a podium, silk scarf perfectly tied, speaking to a group of women about legacy, safety, and trusting the next generation. Then the angle shifted. A service hallway camera captured Patricia handing Owen a list. Denise paused and zoomed in. Names. A list of potential targets. My name was there. So were 14 others. Not leads. Not clients. Not investors. Women. Each name had notes. Widowed. No children. Recent settlement. Divorced. Owns commercial property. Daughter of Harlow. Grief window. Low confidence presentation. Low confidence presentation. I stared at the words until they blurred. Denise's voice softened. Evie. I had not heard her call me that in months. I'm fine, I said. You don't have to be. That was when the anger finally broke through the performance. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a sudden heat behind my eyes. They had not stumbled into hurting women. They had studied pain like a market. They had written grief window beside a me name. For the first time all day, I sat down. Denise closed the tablet cover. We can pause. No. Evelyn. No, I said again, harder. We go public with the pattern. Not just Grant. All of it. That will expose parts of your personal life. Good. She looked at me. I looked at my father's photograph. For years after he died, people treated my grief like a weakness they could price. Board members delayed decisions. Competitors tested boundaries. Men at charity events asked if I had someone advising me now. I thought. Strength meant proving nothing hurt. Grant and Patricia had counted on that. They had counted on women being too embarrassed to say, I trusted him. Too ashamed to say, I signed. Too tired to fight people who knew how to make theft look like romance, family, or care. I opened the tablet again and looked at the list. Call the reporters, I said. Conference room A, 3 o'clock. At 3 o'clock, I stood before the cameras with Lila, Meredith, and Ruth beside me. Grant was already in custody for questioning. Owen was negotiating. Patricia's townhouse had reporters outside. The story had become too large for anyone to bury. I placed both hands on the podium. My name is Evelyn Harlow, I began. This morning, Harlow and Bell completed the acquisition of Whitaker Growth Partners as part of a legal action tied to an ongoing financial fraud investigation. Camera shutters clicked. But I am not here to discuss an acquisition. I am here because men with credentials, charm, family names, and expensive suits have been using love as a contract and trust as a weapon. The room went still. I continued, for nearly 1 year, I allowed myself to be treated as a target so we could document a larger network. I was insulted. Minimized. Pressured. Lied to. Proposito. Not because I lacked power, but because many victims are not believed unless the predator is caught in the act. Lila's shoulder brushed mine. I did not look at her, but I felt the strength of it. We are turning over evidence involving forged documents, fraudulent transfers, predatory investment schemes, and a target list of women selected based on grief, divorce, isolation, age, or family wealth. A reporter shouted, Are you saying your fiancé targeted you? I looked straight into the camera. I am saying he chose the wrong woman to underestimate. That sentence traveled fast. By evening, it was everywhere. But the story was not over. The next morning, Patricia Whitaker appeared on television through her attorney. She denied everything. She called me unstable. Vindictive. A wealthy woman punishing a man for ending a relationship. She said Grant was guilty. Only of loving too hard and trusting the wrong business partner. Then she made the mistake that ended her. She mentioned my father. Evelyn Harlow has always lived under the shadow of her father's empire, Patricia said outside her townhouse, pearl necklace bright against her black coat. Perhaps she needed a public villain to prove she could stand on her own. I watched the clip twice. Denise stood behind me, arms crossed. Do not answer emotionally. I won't. Your face says otherwise. My face ice off the record. At 9 o'clock that night, an encrypted file arrived from Owen Saturny. Cooperation had begun. Inside was the final twist. Patricia had not only helped Grant target women. Years earlier, she had tried to target my father. There were emails from 6 years ago, before his illness became public, when Patricia had attempted to pitch him a private philanthropic investment vehicle. He refused. Then he had his internal team quietly review her network. My father had known something was wrong. He had opened a file. He had named it letterhead. Inside were notes, partial records, and a handwritten memo scanned into the system. Patricia Whitaker presents as society fundraiser, possible use of charitable structures to launder reputation and funds. Watch for romance-based access through Sun. Through Sun. My father had seen Grant coming years before Grant ever met me. But the file had been buried after my father died. Not by accident. By a senior partner who later resigned and joined a fund connected to Patricia. I sat alone in my office long after midnight, reading my father's memo until the words became unbearable. He had tried to warn the future. I had found the warning too late. For a few minutes, I was not Evelyn Harlow, managing partner. I was 31 again, standing beside a hospital bed, listening to my father tell me Tori had everything twice and trust grief slowly. Denise knocked once and entered without waiting. You found it, she said. You knew? I suspected there was an old file. Your father mentioned Patricia once. He called her dangerous in Kashmir. That almost made me laugh. Almost. Denise sat across from me. There's more. I looked up. She placed a printed page on the desk. It was a payment record. $500,000 routed from a Patricia-linked entity to a consulting company owned by Martin Keene, the senior partner who tried to push me out after my father's death. Martin had told me I was too young to lead. Too emotional. Too attached to pro bono work. He had smiled at my father's funeral and then spent 8 months trying to strip authority from me while I was still learning how to breathe without crying in elevators. Now I understood. He had not doubted me. He had been paid to weaken me. That was the third twist. Grant was not the beginning of the attack. He was the second wave. Patricia had wanted access to Harlow and Bell for years. My father blocked her. Martin helped her after he died. Grant was sent not only to rob me, but to marry into the firm's ownership structure, influence my trust, and eventually force a merger that would give their network legal cover. This was never just romance fraud. This was an attempted takeover wearing an engagement ring. I felt the room tilt. Then settle. Very slowly, I took my father's silver pen from my pocket and placed it on the desk. Wake up, Marion, I said. Denise checked her watch. It's 12:42. She'll be angry if we wait. Judge Marion Wells answered on the second ring. By sunrise, Harlow and Bell filed emergency actions in 3 jurisdictions. By noon, Martin Keene's assets were frozen. By 2 o'clock, Patricia's charity foundation suspended operations. By evening, 7 more women had contacted our office. By the end of the week, the number was 22. Some had lost money. Some had lost homes. Some had lost years blaming themselves. None of them were nobody. Grant asked to see me before his first major hearing. I said no. Then Ruth called me. He needs to see one woman he failed to break, she said. Let it be you. So I went. Not alone. Denise came with me and stood behind the glass. Grant sat in a gray interview room wearing a county-issued jumpsuit that made him look smaller than I remembered. Without the watch, the suit, the restaurant lighting, the adoring audience, he seemed almost ordinary. That was the most disturbing part. Evil does not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it asks about your day and learns your bank passwords. He looked up when I entered. For a second, I saw the old calculation. Could he charm me, shame me, seduce me? Make me remember a version of him that never existed? Then he saw my face and gave up. You came, he said. Ruth asked me to. Pain flickered across his expression. How is she? Freezing every account connected to your mother. He laughed bitterly. That sounds like her. No. It sounds like justice. He leaned back. You think you're different? From me? Yes. You lied for almost a year. To stop you. You enjoyed it. I sat down. No, I said. That is what makes us different. You enjoyed making people small. I endured it so they could stand up. His mouth tightened. My mother built everything, he said. You don't understand what it's like to have a family legacy. I stared at him. You targeted me because of mine. He looked away. For the first time, I wondered if Grant had ever had a self that wasn't Patricia's project. Then I decided it didn't matter. Plenty of people are raised by monsters and choose not to become one. Did you ever love anyone? I asked. His eyes returned to mine. I loved you in my way. No, I said. You loved access. You loved control. You loved the idea of making thank you for stealing from me. He swallowed. If I testify against my mother, they'll reduce the charges. That is between you and your lawyer. You could speak for me. I will. Hope flashed in his face. I let it live for 1 second. I'll tell the court exactly what you did. The hope died. He looked down at his hands. I was going to marry you. You were going to bury me inside my own life. Silence. Then he whispered, "What do you want?" That question stayed with me. A year earlier, I might have said revenge. I might have wanted him ruined publicly, completely, permanently. I did want that for a while. I wanted him to feel every second off humiliation he fed me with a smile. But sitting across from him, I realized revenge was too small for what he had done. I want every woman your family taught to feel stupid to understand she was hunted, I said. I want every document unsealed. Every broker named. Every fake charity exposed. Every house recovered that can be recovered. Every account traced. Every professional license reviewed. Every man who laughed with you afraid to open his email. Grant stared at me. And you? He asked. I stood. I want my name back. The hearings lasted months. Grant cooperated only after Owen gave prosecutors enough evidence to make him look disposable. Patricia fought hardest. She wore black to court and dabbed her eyes for cameras until the judge ordered media removed from the hallway. Martin Keene claimed. The payment was a consulting fee. It took 3 forensic accountants and 11,000 emails to prove the consulting involved weakening my voting control after my father's death. The day Patricia was indicted, Ruth sat beside me in court. When the charges were read, Patricia did not look at Grant. She looked at me. There was no fear in her face. Only resentment. People like Patricia do not regret harm. They regret losing ownership of the story. After the hearing, reporters crowded outside. One asked if I felt satisfied. I thought of Lila selling her jewelry to cover legal bills. Meredith driving past her old building because she missed the view from her grandmother's kitchen. Ruth refusing to attend family holidays because shame had convinced her she helped them rob her. Satisfied was not the word. No, I said. But I feel awake. Grant was sentenced first. Owen lost his license and took a plea. Martin Keene was disbarred, then indicted. Patricia's foundation collapsed under subpoenas, and several board members suddenly forgot how to answer simple questions. Over 8 months, we recovered partial assets for 13 women. Not enough, never enough. Money returns differently after betrayal. A house is not just a house after someone steals the safety from it. A bank account is not just numbers after love was used as a crowbar. So Harlow and Bell created a permanent unit for victims of intimate financial fraud. We called it the Fine Print Project. At the opening, I placed my father's old law books in a glass case near the entrance. Beside them, I placed a copy of the blue folder Grant had signed. Not the original. That stayed in evidence. But a copy, bound and sealed, with one sentence engraved below it. Read what they ask you to sign, and read who they become when you hesitate. Lila, Meredith, and Ruth stood with me at the ribbon cutting. Not behind me. Beside me, Lila became director of survivor outreach. Meredith built a housing recovery partnership for women who lost property through coercive transfers. Ruth led family fraud education, and nobody in any room dared treat her like a fragile old woman again. Denise refused a title at first. I don't do ceremonies, she said. It gave her an office anyway. She pretended to hate it. 1 year after Grant tucked that blue folder into his briefcase, I returned to the restaurant in Tribeca. Not alone. Denise came. So did Lila, Meredith, Ruth, and 4 women who had won settlements that month. We sat at the same table where Grant had toasted to never worrying about money again. We ordered coffee instead of wine. For a while, nobody mentioned him. We talked about a recovered townhouse in Boston. A frozen account in Miami. A young woman in Chicago who called our hotline before signing anything her boyfriend brought her. We talked about ordinary things too. Bad dates. Good shoes. Denise terrible cooking. Ruth's new apartment, where every piece of furniture was chosen by her and nobody else. At one point, the waiter placed the check near me. Ruth snatched it. Absolutely not, she said. I am paying for my own coffee like a dangerous woman. We laughed so loudly the couple at the next table turned around. I looked around at their faces and felt something in me loosen. For so long, I thought healing would be dramatic. A verdict. A headline. A door slammed in Grant's face. But sometimes healing is women laughing in a restaurant where one of them was once quietly being measured for a cage. After dinner, I stepped outside into the cold. Manhattan shone around us, hard and beautiful. In the restaurant window, I saw my reflection. Not Evie Bell, the timid attorney Grant tried to design. Not just Evelyn Harlow, the daughter of a powerful man. Not the fiancé who smiled while being insulted. I saw a woman who had learned that silence could be strategy, beauty should never become a home. Denise came out beside me. You okay? I smiled. No, she nodded. Then I said, but I'm free. Later that night, I went back to my office. The building was quiet. My father's desk waited under the lamp. I opened the bottom drawer and took out the copy of Grant's blue folder. For a moment, I held it the way he had held it in the elevator, close to the chest, believing it contained a future. Then I placed it beside my father's books. Not as a trophy. Not as proof that I had won. As a reminder. Nobody gets to touch my life again without reading the fine print. And nobody gets to decide who I am before I sign my own name.